Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
We're going to have a guest on today, I understand, that's going to ask about the balloon episode in the United States recently that was shot down by an F-22 Raptor over the waters just off the coast of South Carolina. I wish I could say something encouraging, something is getting better in the country, but that doesn't seem to be the case because the agenda of the elected officials and the media is in direct conflict with what's in the best interest of the public, and most importantly, our children, all these young people that are going to inherit everything we're doing wrong today. Interestingly enough, at about 7 p.m. last night in the Rockefeller Center area, there was a robbery with a gun and shots fired. So I guess they want to tell you there's nothing going on in New York. It's all your imagination. We've had people slashed on the subway and pushed on the train in front of trains already this year. You know, I wish they could just divorce themselves from that political lens they look through and start to look at what's actually going on in the country and how it's going to impact the future of our young people. Those of us that are old enough, you know, we're going to slip through, be very candid with you. Something else that you might find interesting, because I keep talking about the country fracturing and secession. Well, it looks like 11 counties in the state of Oregon are asking to come under the jurisdiction of the state of Idaho because they are not, I would say, politically aligned with how the state of Seattle is being run. The state of Oregon is being run. So they want to now become part of the state of Idaho. Interesting. I think I spoke about this before, folks. This could be the direction we're going. States like Texas and Florida and Nevada and Idaho and even New Hampshire, you know, Tennessee, there's a number of states that have financial autonomy, and they may not need the federal government or any of their edicts that deal with abortion or gun control or whatever topic it might be that they find distasteful and inconsistent with their constituents. It would be nice if we could figure out how to build a bridge. It would be nice if we could get to the truth of what's going on in this government, especially with this laptop that was in the possession of Hunter Biden. I really don't care about his personal life. I think you shouldn't either, to be very candid with you. It's really not our concern. Go live your life in privacy and protect your privacy. That's what I always say. But this concern about collusion with Ukraine, Russia, and China, and I have to tell you, I wish I could say this and it not be true, but the president, you know, he just lied again this past week. He said he just found out about the balloon last Wednesday. That's not true, folks. And what I say to you today, I say to you all the time. I'm not here to ingrain in your brain what you should be thinking. I'm here to give you food for thought. I'm not here to spoon feed you. And I'm also telling you, don't be spoon-fed by the media. This media has to be brought under control somehow without violating the First Amendment. I do think we need some form of oversight. You know, they talked about the disinformation squad that was going to be developed during this administration. That suddenly left the conversation, primarily because there's a lot of different disinformation on both sides, and you would have to speak to both of it, I would think, if you were going to be effective. I do want to mention Whoopi Goldberg, just quite briefly, because I'm confounded as to how she still remains on air, but in one of her rants, she came out and said that the vice president could declassify information, and she didn't see what the problem here. Well, I just want to explain to you that that's just not true. We're going to have a gentleman on later who's been on before, Tom Fuentes, a former assistant director of the FBI, who actually had the authority to classify information and has intimate knowledge of how the SCIFs are functioning, and the fact that the vice president cannot declassify information. But I'll let Tom speak to that independent of what I'm saying right now. Tom, if you've listened to him, has an immense amount of knowledge and insight. He's actually quite a character. He's a bit of an historian, and we're going to ask him about this whole balloon issue, even in the past around World War II. I'll let him speak to that as well. The issue at the border speaks for itself. If you're following what's going on in the city of New York, the accommodations that were created by the city were not up to the standard of the migrants who are here in our country illegally. I don't know how much crazier this is going to get. They're refusing to vacate these hotels that they're destroying. That's not my opinion. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Hotel employees from the Row Hotel have come on air and provided documentation as to the level of destruction of some of these hotel rooms. I tell you something interesting. The mayor who received all of these migrants open-armed, he talked a big game. And I'm not trying to shoot down Eric Adams. He's got a tough job, guys. He's in a real interesting stride. Has now 40,000 migrants in the city of New York. And now he's asking for $1 billion of taxpayers' money from the federal government. So don't take that money and take care of your children or provide them a lifestyle that they should be entitled to. Let's pay your taxes and then have them pay for people who are illegally in this country in the 5 million plus. At some point, guys, this has to be brought back into alignment or we're not going to be able to sustain this. The level of division, the level of polarization, the divide is just overwhelming, and it's amplifying every day. Interestingly enough, some articles have been passed on to me about the blacks in New York leaving in record number. They said 9%, I believe it was in 2000, left the city of New York. I just want to whisper into the Republicans' ear, which I bring this up all the time. You got slapped around pretty good during the midterms in 2008. People would have thought the country had enough of the crazy. Apparently we haven't. At some point, put your thinking cap on and send in your emissaries to the minority communities. I'll take you if you like. We'll find the local clergy and elected officials and start to enlist their help in convincing the minority community that they need a conservative element that is law-abiding so we can prevent their children from being collateral damage, guys. We can get them an education, upgrade their housing, their diet, their medicine. Everybody's sitting on their hands, letting this go by day after day. Meanwhile, in case you haven't noticed, there's a disproportionate of minorities on the television today in every capacity, in movies, which is, I have no issue with it. If they're talented, and many of them are just really smart. You can see they're smart and talented. They're entitled to a shot, and it creates a good optic. But you're just scratching at the surface. That's what I call smoke and mirrors. Come up into Brooklyn North or parts of Harlem, and God forbid you go to the Bronx. The Bronx is just off the hook. The shootings are off the hook. New York City police officer was shot in the head the other day trying to buy a car. I won't get into the details of the mistake that this young man made, but he's going to expire likely, and my understanding is he's on life support so they can harvest his organs. These are interesting times we're living in, folks, and there's got to be a way out because we're not going to hold up. And the issue with this podcast, just to remind you, this is not about contention. It's about telling you the truth. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I'm just giving you food for thought. Please feel free to challenge anything we say. This is not about spoon feeding you. You've had enough of that. It doesn't work. They polluted your thought process. And I remind you of this. A minuscule percentage of this country is steering this country. They're creating your narrative and your optic. You know what really bothers me? Is that even when we stumble upon something that is problematic, we just can't tell you the truth about it, whether it's the management of classified information or whatever topic. We're going to go to a quick break. I do just want to remind you about our sponsors, Buzzsprout and Instacart. They're both very legitimate. We're going to be right back. Just stay with me. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and with us today again,
very effective, and
because of his level of credibility, insight, expertise, experience, and You're probably going to find this interesting. You know, I know Tom a few years, and I didn't realize what a historian he is. So Tom is going to be joining us today again, and we do have a gentleman on the phone, Michael, who has a question for us that we're now going to listen to, and we're going to try to respond to him, hopefully to his satisfaction. Michael, are you there?
Yeah, how you doing, Lou?
Good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing fine, man. Bear with the background noise. I'm driving back from Tampa. I just had to meet up with one of my publishers that's going to publish my second book. But
where are you from, Michael?
But it's great to be on your show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling.
I live in Orlando, Florida.
Is that where you're from?
Yeah, Orlando. Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Very good. So you have a question, Michael, today?
Yeah, it's regarding the whole, spy balloon, the latest on that. And, there's been a lot of, questions on that, since it came into the radar on the media. But I just wanted to bring that in. I don't know if you guys want to discuss that, but it's kind of interesting, because we had this, in our atmosphere, in our country for a week prior to the media actually touching on it. And I find that kind of quite interesting on why they didn't discuss this and why the president really didn't bring it into the general public.
Michael, I find that quite consistent because we've developed this propensity to withhold information from the public in many areas, not just this, but for example, and we're not going to go into this whole thing about classified information, but that happens to be another area where they were a little slow on the draw in providing us some information or insight as to the scope or the timeline of how this classified information hit the radar screen. And unfortunately, your perception and your insight as to how this was managed by the media is spot on. I just mentioned before I brought you on and brought Tom on, it's bad enough we're having problems, and it lends itself to issues of trustworthiness. What's really disconcerting is that we can't seem to get a straight, truthful answer. In reference to the balloon, I'm going to defer to Tom Fuentes, who you may have heard. This gentleman, Michael, is a former assistant director of the FBI. He's one of very, very few in the FBI. He ran the FBI's international offices, about 80 of them, their field operation. He was involved in organized crime, not a participant, but from the standpoint of the government, although thought may have crossed his mind. I'm only kidding, Tom. I'm kidding with you. He was involved in Interpol intimately. I mean, he had really an incredible career. So you're probably going to find this interesting. So, Tom, before we answer his question about modern day times in balloons, give us a little background on balloons in America.
Well, first of all, Lou, in the aftermath of 9/11, everybody criticized the CIA, the FBI, the intel community for not thinking outside the box, that, this could have been foretold or whatever, that it was going to happen. Back in World War II, and I'm bringing that up because back in World War II, in the closing months, and specifically May 1945, we were closing in on the Japan main island, home islands, Okinawa. We had kamikaze pilots flying into our ships in the Pacific. And so the war was not yet over. Meantime, May 5th, 1945, a balloon descends in an open picnic area next to a church in Bly, Oregon. The Reverend Archie Mitchell, his 5-month pregnant wife, and he takes 5 other kids on this field trip to have this picnic. And they're out there, and all of a sudden this balloon descends in the middle of them, and they go over to check it out. And before Archie can yell out, "Don't touch it," it explodes, kills his wife, 5 other children. And then they determined that this balloon was put in the air over Japan, with Japan relying on the winds to blow it over the United States, which it did. Japan also, we find out later, launched over 900 balloons, hoping they'd come in our direction, land on the ground, people would mess with them, and they would explode. So I'm just saying that there are a lot of reasons to be suspicious of this Chinese balloon, separate from they're encroaching on our territory to get weather information or to look at our military bases, which they can see clear as a bell from outer space. The satellites can pick up license plate numbers off of cars on the ground. So I don't think the balloon photography was the.
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead. You want to say something,
I'm aware
Michael?
of
Go
the
ahead.
technology. Yeah, I'm sorry to chime in, but I'm aware of technology. I'm aware of modern technology. I discuss this on my show sometimes as well, too, with high intellect individuals with this type of technology and these type of spy balloons. But what I'm trying to say is, it's kind of interesting that, Tom has mentioned wind, right? Certain countries or certain governments depend on wind to carry these balloons from point A to point B. But what's kind of interesting is that this balloon sat over Montana for a quite period of time, and then all of a sudden blew from Montana to South Carolina. And I know we have, special bases in South Carolina and everything. I don't want to go into detail. Montana to South Carolina. In my aspect of seeing that to me looked like it was controlled by an unknown source. Possibly, sadly, it could have been our own government. I mean, we've seen things happen in our own government that's still questionable. Or perhaps it happened in a foreign country. But don't you find that quite interesting, Tom, where it went from point A to point B? And then prior to that, this weather balloon or this spy balloon or whatever it may have been was sitting in our country for a week. Why did the president of the United States wait an entire week to have military shoot this thing down?
Well, if I can just interject here, Tom may not have the answer to that because I think that's part of what's bothering us, Michael. We're looking at these timelines that are being created, and as I just mentioned, whether it's when we found classified information, when they were in possession, we can't get a straight, truthful answer here. But I did listen to the president, and that's a very, very unfortunate statement because, I want to say something to you that we discuss all the time. I almost can't find an adult that when I ask him, do you trust the government, they say yes, or the media. But understand this is the way our young people are thinking too. This is why we're going to have a problem with our younger generations here, because if we don't believe in the institutions, what makes us think they do? That's why this has to be corrected, Michael. What we're experiencing is selective reporting. We're experiencing the news outlets, the media outlets choosing to be extensions of our political parties. All of this is feeding this. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, but let Tom speak to you about some other concerns about intercepting this balloon, because it's not really a black and white issue. There are other concerns about when we should have intercepted it. For example, perhaps as it was coming over the Aleutian Islands, and once it got here, how you manage it. So go ahead, Tom. I know you have some insight in this.
Well, to me, the Biden administration would have one legitimate excuse for not shooting that down over our continental United States, and that would be, China just gave us 1 million dead Americans from the COVID virus over the last 3 years. What if they've got a new variant? Because we know that we've been helping fund their gain of function research at the Wuhan lab. So what if they've come up with a newer, deadlier, more toxic form or variant that we don't have anything to fight, and they put that in the balloon and send it up, and maybe it could be done in a way that if you shot that balloon, blew it up in the sky, that variant would rain down on us. Now, also going back to World War II, Japan had a research facility doing biological chem and other dangerous materials, and they were flying this stuff over Chinese villages where thousands died from a virus or a biological weapon being injected in the atmosphere above the village. So I don't trust our administration. I would agree with you there, but I certainly don't trust the Chinese administration.
If I may chime in, Tom, you mentioned, COVID, the Wuhan lab. It's quite interesting that, you see the man that's been basically, communicating, I guess, to an extent, with what he knows from the CDC and, Anthony Fauci. It's interesting, that Anthony Fauci is not really communicating so much now to the general public. He's kind of been put in the dark with all this. I'd really like to understand, I believe that there needs to be questions by the FBI, I believe, and that's my own.
Michael, you're going through. Michael, you're going through a rough spot there. That's why we're not picking you up clearly. Do we have you, buddy? Michael? Michael? All right. Maybe to our producer, Mr. Molander, maybe he'll call back in. I'm going to hang up and let him call back in, Lloyd. In the meantime, we're going to continue this conversation because Tom just articulated some very legitimate concerns about intercepting these balloons over the country. They could be weaponized to some degree, not just used for the purpose of intelligence gathering. My question is, why wasn't this addressed when it was coming over the Aleutian Islands? And, I don't understand this mentality or approach that under any circumstance, any foreign object, regardless of nature, would be allowed to kind of traverse the United States, and that for whatever reason we sat on our hands with this thing once again. But Tom did express to you that there were concerns. The government chose to wait for this balloon to pass off the coast of South Carolina, about 6 miles, still within our boundaries, our borders, and then an F-22 Raptor intercepted it. And I think, Tom, you agree that, what they did in doing that was correct. And I just want to add also, we've been involved in covering the security of film crews down there, and they've created a 20-mile perimeter around the site in which this device from the bottom of the balloon dropped into the ocean. So they're now in the recovery process. But, guys, what this lends itself to once again is that we're sitting here scratching our heads, wondering what we can believe from the government, when we can believe it from the government, how complicit is the media, their fingerprints on all of this. And, this is very unsettling. And I just say this, you have to realize something else about this. Coupled to the conversation is the word China, the same word that's attached to Penn State, University of Pennsylvania, the same thing that's attached to classified documents in Biden's possession, the same word that's associated with his son having taken money or creating some type of convoluted relationship. Guys, when we come back, I'm going to ask Tom a very interesting question about the FBI's concerns or involvement in this balloon gate thing we have going on. We'll be right back, guys. Stick with us. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. We have Tom Fuentes, former assistant director of the FBI, wealth of knowledge and insight and experience, quite an historian. And just at the break, I was getting ready to ask Tom what he thinks the FBI's involvement or concerns were when this was all going on. We know the military were up on their toes, but what about the FBI, Tom? Says this lends itself to something relating to the national security. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, the FBI, first of all, could be checking their sources, sources with their offices throughout Asia in particular, as well as here in the United States. Does anybody have any information pertaining to these balloons and why China would send them? You would hope that's happening, and that the FBI wasn't too busy chasing parents at school board meetings to pay attention to this. We don't know, and we may never know. Secondly, as far as the intel community, they're all of a sudden these balloons are in the sky, and apparently China sent many of them. And Chinese meteorologists could check the jet stream, what it was projected to do. And if you recall last week, we had a polar vortex bringing down frigid air from the North Pole, from the polar region through Canada into the United States. That was also just coincidentally the flight path of this balloon, bringing it over the main, because sometimes in the winter, the jet stream doesn't even go over the United States. It stays in Canada, going west to east. In this case, it came way south into the United States, bringing that balloon with it. So the Chinese probably knew exactly what they were doing when they launched it, exactly where it was going to go, and probably, even if it had nothing on it that would make it weaponized, Probably they were just testing our president and our administration. What will they do when they see this thing over the U.S. airspace? Interestingly, I've done some research on international law concerning airspace. You know that items in the sky that are floating more than 50 or 60,000 feet above the ground are in international airspace. Much like on the ocean, when something is more than 12 miles from the shore, it's international waters. So the airspace of countries is protected up to about 50,000 feet, up to about the stratosphere, to protect its own civil aviation in that country.
Tom, who makes that?
Could have been in a free space.
Who made that determination, Tom? Because in light of the capabilities of some of our aircraft, for example, we have the SR-71 Blackbird that flies on the fringe of outer space. Who made this determination, especially in light of recent times and the advancement of technology and weaponry, aircraft, etc.? Who decided that, we were going to have international airspace? Where did that come from? Do you know?
It's been decided for a long time. The various international treaties that govern aviation leave actually from the end of our ground aviation limit, like 50 or 60,000 feet. From there into space, that's international. That's why you can't shoot down each other's satellites, even though they're in geosynchronous orbit directly over your country. We have satellites directly above us now from Russia, probably China, and they're in free space. They're in outer space. So at some point, ground air no longer belongs to the country that it's over, but it becomes international airspace above a certain level. Now, when we flew the SR-71 Blackbirds and U-2s at 60, 70,000 feet, they were technically in international airspace. We just assumed they couldn't shoot them down and didn't worry about it. Until the U-2 got shot down over Russia during the Eisenhower administration with Francis Gary Powers piloting it and being captured alive, and the U-2 that was shot down over Cuba, taking pictures during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's why the United States couldn't put too much of an argument against it, because it wasn't our airspace. And it was where it was.
Tom, just something, Lloyd, if we can try to get the caller back, but some place that this young man was going, Tom, with a question. Do you think, and you may not be able to answer this may not be in your wheelhouse, but do you think that there was possibly a mechanism attached to this balloon that allowed them to navigate it remotely, kind of like we do with drones? What do you think, Tom?
Well, that could be. But because of the balloon and the weight it could carry, the size of it, we don't know how big of a couple, let's say they had a couple of engines on it that could fire up and move it around, change the direction of it. But if that balloon's in the jet stream, it's going to take a monstrous engine to overcome the jet stream. So it's going to get blown whether they have little motors or not.
So I think, Tom, it's safe to say that at this juncture, we're waiting to hear, hopefully, credible information from the recovery of this device that was attached to the bottom of the balloon, and then it's going to be an issue of what they're willing to tell us or not tell us, so on and so forth. Tom, I want to switch topics with you very quickly here, because it's a whole lot of confusion about this handling of classified information and this term that the public's now been exposed to called SCIF. Tom, I want to walk through it so the laymen really wrap their arms around this. Please explain what a SCIF is and how it is, what the control mechanisms are, and how you have to, I would say, knowingly and intentionally remove a document from there. Please get into this SCIF. Describe what it is, and please explain the mechanics attached.
Well, first of all, the term SCIF basically is a secure classified information facility. So basically, if you remember the old TV show Get Smart, the cone of silence. And a SCIF can be anywhere from the oversized closet, which I've been in many of those around the world. Every embassy of the U.S. and consulate has a SCIF. So I've been in some that essentially are oversized closets, and I've been in others that'll hold 100 people. And so to enter the SCIF, you have, in embassies, for example, you have members of the State Department's office of, that protect, diplomatic security office that protect embassies and consulates. They control the physical location of the SCIF, who goes in, who goes out. They're in a position to check. The clearances are in a master system government-wide. So they may start a meeting in a big room or in a SCIF that says, okay, this topic is going to be law enforcement sensitive. so everybody can hear the lecture or whatever the topic that comes up. Now we're going to switch to top secret. If you don't have top secret, leave the room. And they already knew, the security officer already knows the person entering the room, what level they're classified to. And then it goes on from that, and the crowd dwindles depending on the level of their clearances.
Tom,
So
let me stop you
when
for a second. Let me stop for a second, sir. Please explain how a classified document is handled by any individual that's given access to a SCIF. How exactly, what's the mechanics, the actual mechanics of handling, so people understand there's no process that you could mistakenly take a document out of a SCIF. Get into that for me, please, Tom.
Okay, you enter the SCIF, and there might be 15 or 20 of you, let's say, that are in there. And you get to where your level of clearance kicks in, and anybody that doesn't have that high of a clearance of top secret and above, in many cases, they have to leave the room. Then the SCIF is locked down again by the diplomatic security officer or a military officer that controls that. Now, for Congress, there's a SCIF in the basement of the U.S. Capitol. So if they're going to see SCIFed material, classified material, they go down into that. Their clearances are checked by basically the doorman who's letting people in, and they go through the master section, the master list of who has what clearance. And then normally those clearances are passed before you even go to the meeting. They already have your name, description of you, and the level of clearance that you have. So you enter this room, and if everybody in there is going to be briefed on the next topic, then they might pass out folders that go on the table, and everybody can look at them. When the meeting's over, close the folders and leave it. They cannot leave with the folder. Going into the SCIF, they cannot bring any electronic device whatsoever, and they can't draw pictures of what they're looking at. But they cannot bring in a smartphone, a pager, a recording device, anything like that that's electronic, camera. Those are all forbidden, and they have check boxes outside the door of the SCIF where you check in your stuff into that box, and then you take the key to it and hold the key.
What about Tom? What about an attaché case or a briefcase?
You can't
bring that into a SCIF. So there's really no way that you can walk out of a SCIF unless you're holding a classified document in your hand.
I would think so.
Okay.
I can't imagine that you could unless the security officer controlling the SCIF allows it.
That's my point, Tom.
Or doesn't pay close attention, and the person that's in the meeting, thinks, "Oh, I'm going to be so smart. I'm going to take this document and take it out."
So a U.S. senator who has proper clearance could be allowed in a SCIF. He could be permitted to look at documents that were classified incidental to his committee role. But there is no way you can make a mistake as a U.S. senator and walk out of a SCIF with a document, because you don't have a briefcase to put it in. You don't have an attaché to put it in. Maybe you stuff it in your shirt. You see where I'm going with this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the whole point of this conversation, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a political discussion. Tom and I and this entire podcast operation, producers, everyone involved in it, we are the same like-mindedness. Republican or Democrat, we don't care. One set of rules universally applied. In this instance, it happens to be the President of the United States, which is quite disconcerting. But this is simple. If he was a Republican, we would be hot on his trails the same way we are. And it's not about politics, folks. It's about the integrity and the trustworthiness of government. I didn't want to go off on a little rant on there, folks, but I want to make sure, Tom, everybody understands we're not out here promoting the platform or the agenda of the Republican Party. Because to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, they're not doing us much service overall anyway, in a number of areas. So I want to go back to this thing. So this cannot be a mistake. Now, let me ask you, maybe you throw the guy at the door of 5, Tom, he lets you out. Is that how it's being done? You grease the doorman?
I would hope not.
I would also think not, Tom. I'm having a little levity here and something that's really very, very serious.
Thing. With a senator, it's a different story. If you have the vice president, and the vice president is going into the Oval Office to have a meeting with the president can order some of these files to be brought to his office for review by him or the vice president or whatever. As we know now from Trump, actually, everybody doesn't know it because it's lied about so much in the media. But the president can declassify anything. Now, from a legal standpoint, and we haven't heard boo out of Obama, but during the time that Biden was vice president, he could have been in the Oval Office and Obama could have had files brought in and said, these are declassified. I don't care what it is. And there's no mechanism to tear up the folder. It's still going to be red colored or yellow colored. It's going to have a color designator. It's going to have top secret, the various other letters that denote different levels of top secret or above. And the president on the spot could say, I'm declassifying this here, Joe, all yours. That could happen. Now, we have not, since all this came up with with Biden last fall and now, we haven't heard anything out of Obama saying, oh, it's no problem. I declassified those, Joe. So Joe is not holding documents illegally. That could have happened, but we don't hear anything out of Obama that it did happen.
We're going to take a quick break, Tom, and I'm going to come back because I want to ask you what happens to the Oval Office once the president introduces classified documents. Does that become a SCIF? We're going to ask that question to Tom. We're going to be right back. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. We had a young man on the phone, Michael, who we wanted to delve into his background a bit more for you. He apparently has some type of podcast, and he's authored some books. We didn't have a chance to keep him on long enough. Maybe we'll get him back. But I want to continue this conversation with a former assistant director of the FBI, Tom Fuentes, who's been on the show. He's has an incredible amount of information and has been intimately involved in the handling, and he's even been permitted to classify a document based on his review. But Tom, I want to go back to this comment you made about the President of the United States introducing classified information into the Oval Office and inviting the Vice President in. Does that automatically become a SCIF?
Doesn't have to be a SCIF because he's just declassified the documents. So when you enter the Oval Office and the president is reviewing classified material and allows you to look at it, he is technically declassifying it right on the spot. So you don't have to be in a SCIF. It's public information.
Interesting. So that if the president brings a classified document into the Oval Office, it then becomes declassified by doing that, Tom? Am I understanding that correctly, sir?
No, he could declassify it by just having it.
But what if he doesn't, though, Tom? What if the intent is
he doesn't have to declare it? This is the one thing that the legal system is remiss. We don't have a formal declassification system for the president. We have it for everybody else. So if I classified a document and it says, okay, that all the different initials and codes indicate that the originator of the classification can remove the classification, that would be me. So I can classify it for now. And then later, when I don't think it remains classified, I can say, okay, it's unclassified. And I can mark on the document that I've unclassified it and what date and who I am, because I was the originator. But if you have the president, there's no mechanism for him to write on the document or put a stamp on the folder or anything. So that when they talk, when the media talks about when they went in the Oval Office, there were documents marked classified. That doesn't mean they were at that point. And for everything we know, they were not.
I have a really important
markings.
I have a really important question to ask you, Tom. So I want you to listen attentively. I know you're a very, very smart man. So last week, when Whoopi Goldberg came out and said that the vice president could declassify information, she was wrong?
Consider the source.
Have a little fun with me, Tom, today, because she actually had the audacity, among other misspeaks, to come out last week and say she didn't understand what the hubbub was about because the president can declassify and the vice president can declassify. And I'm just kind of sitting to the outtake that they were putting throughout on some of the media. And I'm going like, sometimes better if you just stay in your lane and stop trying to talk about this. But I wanted to make sure that Whoopi wasn't wrong. That's all I'm saying, Tom.
She was wrong.
Okay, very good. I'll go with you on that one. All right, guys. The value with this conversation is so the listener, the audience, has a very clear understanding about this handling of classified information. And, we're also hearing now them say, well, some things are overclassified. This is my opinion. Tom, I'd like you to correct me. If a piece of paper with the lunch order was decided to be classified, it's classified. And it needs to be managed in a proper way, period. So it's not up to us in the media or anyone in government other than those who are intimately knowledgeable about classification of information and its handling to decide what should be handled in what way. If they decide to classify the lunch menu, you need to respect the classification of the lunch menu. I think is that correct, Tom? I mean, it sounds crazy. It's an extreme example. But what I'm saying is this. If the document says classified on the outside of the folder, that should be enough, right, Tom?
It should be, because you're not in a position to know the content, what it really means or how it matters. I'll give you another example. If you have, let's say, a 3-page memo, and every single page by itself is unclassified, and you staple the memo together, it becomes classified. So there are situations where different documents have different pieces of the puzzle, but if you assemble them together, the puzzle is solved, and you know something that technically is a classified thing. So it's very, very tricky. It's very difficult. So even me, when I was an assistant director, I had 2 full-time security officers who technically worked for me, assigned from the security division, which oversees the security of every division of the FBI. And I would often have one or both of them in my office and say, okay, tell me about this, and this about a certain document or a piece of information that we've got. When I'm running international operations for 5 years, we're getting information coming in over our classified channels, but we're getting information from all over the world. And our people assigned overseas are getting it from their sources and contacts in that country. So when that comes in to me at FBI headquarters, I would make the decision, this should probably be classified and what level to do it. So I would bring in my security officers, just because there are so many technical nuances that you would want experts in exactly what level of classification and how to physically mark the documents to do it.
Tom, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we have some people in the media that have decided to state that they believe certain documents have been overclassified. These are people in the media. These are not elected officials necessarily. Some elected officials have made that stated that position as well, which we should maybe listen to. But we have people in the media to feed their narrative, which feeds their political flavor, deciding, well, we've overclassified it. Who are they to say this? This is what's part of the problem in this country and who's steering the ship. Unfortunately, the media has, I would say, compromised their honor and their integrity and their trustworthiness. It's almost like a joke on the street these days. I'm quite confused as to why people even turn them on anymore. We need a 24-hour news cycle here like we need hemorrhoids. I don't know what to say to
them. If people are listening to Whoopi Goldberg, then why wouldn't they listen to CNN or MSNBC or somebody like that? Yeah, so that's the problem.
Point well taken. Point well taken. Guys, we're gonna knock off this topic for the day, but I did want to just spend a few minutes. We were hoping to get Michael back on the line because I did want to talk about this balloon issue. I think Tom spoke to it intelligently. There are a lot of other concerns. Once a balloon breaks our airspace, for example, or maybe not our airspace, maybe this space in which is international, that, if we were to take it down over land, we could have a real serious incident take place, maybe a dispersion of another biological agent or a device of some kind. So these are not simple questions. My question, simply stated, is why this wasn't addressed as it was coming over the Aleutian Islands up near Alaska. I'm going to give you the closing observation or point to address in that regard, Tom.
Well, one issue on that would have been if the balloon's over the Aleutian Islands in Alaska and they shoot it down there and it is carrying some horrible biological chemical weapon, then that's going to be sprayed all over Canada. So we would be possibly killing half of Canada. So that would be a concern. So I think they're thinking if it gets out over South Carolina, it's still within our boundary waters, so we can send the divers down and they can meticulously gather the stuff. It's not out in 10,000 feet of ocean. And then if there is a spray into the atmosphere, it's going to disperse before it hits Africa or Europe or somewhere else like that. So I'm giving the administration a tremendous benefit of doubt that they thought this through and that might have been the reason. It could also be the reason that they were so befuddled and so confused, they had no clue what to do, that they waited till it's past the United States and then over the Atlantic Ocean, now shoot it. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know. And the problem, this is a reason why, just editorial comment, This is a reason why the administration, not just the Biden, but previous, every administration, should try to tell the truth as much as they can so that their veracity isn't in doubt. So when they make a statement, this is dangerous, or this is why we didn't do that, there's more of a tendency to believe it than think they're lying, they're hiding it, who knows?
Tom, we're going to go to a quick break, and I'm going to move on to some emails. Tom, thank you for joining us again today.
You're welcome.
I know you'll be back, and I hope this was helpful to the listener and anyone viewing this as well. I think Tom provided you some very viable, logical, reasonable, rational, and most importantly, a truthful accounting of what's kind of going on with balloons, government mechanism, classified information, so on and so forth. Good to take a quick break. We'll be right back, guys. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to hit on at least one email. So if our producer would be so kind. Yep. Lance from Binghamton, New York says, incoming Republican Congressman George Santos is caught in so many lies regarding resume, past employment, educational history that now the federal prosecutors in New York are launching an investigation. He has to be impeached, right? Otherwise, what's to keep this from happening again? Future candidates. Accountability is what we're concerned about. All right, let me just start out by saying this. George, if you're listening, okay, let me be clear. You don't lie before you get in. After you get in, then you can start the lying process, okay? As far as the federal prosecutors going after him, they better go after Blumenthal. They better go after Biden. They better go after any number of these individuals that misrepresented their backgrounds. In fact, I hate to pick on the president. It just happens to be the truth, not politically driven. Got caught plagiarizing, which caused them to drop out of a campaign. All I want to say is the timing was wrong, George. After you get in, then you can lie your ass off, and there's no accountability. Hope that answered the question, folks. As far as the federal investigation locally, I think there's also some issue with AOC and campaign finance fraud, but we're going to selectively investigate and selectively report. Let me see if we have another email here. Do we have another email here, Admiral Molander?
We do not.
You only are an admiral because you ride a surfboard. You don't get a vessel, but you're the admiral of that surfboard at least. That's it. Guys, I hope that you found this interesting today. We're trying to bring professionals onto this podcast and individuals with questions that lead us to some type of, I would say, insight and problem solving, because we're just in a heap of trouble today. And, I don't understand why we're preoccupied with beating each other over the head, why we don't put some more energy into finding out how to reinstill trust and integrity and honor and truth, which is part of the word trust, by the way, into government and the media and into our daily lives. This is what's so interesting is that you watch the way the media operates in particular, and we're teaching our children everything opposite of the way that they behave. We're trying to instill in them the values of kindness, patience, being gentle. What does the media do? They ridicule, demean, and defile. That's what we're teaching our kids exactly the opposite. It's just amazing. Worse than that, we're paying them tens of millions of dollars to do it. We have to figure out how to get this back into balance, how to create some form of oversight where they're not permitted to, I would say things that are overly provocative or contentious. I just want to touch on something like with Maxine Waters, recommending to people to obstruct and interfere with anyone that was in alignment of thinking with the President of the United States. That's just contrary to who we are as Americans. We're supposed to learn from the time we're little that it's okay that we're different, that we don't invalidate the concerns of other people. Let me tell you this, ladies and gentlemen. If you get involved in a romantic relationship, and I don't care if it's with a kumquat, and you invalidate its feeling, you're going to have some pushback. If it's your spouse, regardless of gender, you have to understand and listen to what they're saying, even if it's not in alignment with your thinking process. That's about having big boy pants. It's lacking in the media. It's lacking in the government. One thing I do want to say is, and I keep saying this, the Republicans, it's incumbent upon them to do nothing but to get to the truth of some issues regarding classified information and its handling, who it was exposed to. This thing with Hunter Biden, which is quite troubling, the fact that the president is being caught lying again. George Santos, if you're listening, Pay attention here. Your timing is terrible. Get in, and then you can get schooled by some of these knuckleheads that seem to have mastered the art of deception. That's the worst part about the conversation today. We are in a concerted effort to intentionally and on a daily basis mislead the public away from the truth. It's not healthy for this country. And by the way, if they ever want to fix some of these problems, like at the border, to everyone's satisfaction, there's a way to do it. Our major cities have gone to hell in a handbasket. There's a way to get these cities back. It's not the way the Democrats are doing it. That's one thing I can tell you right now, because they've done nothing for the minority community. You're listening to and looking at a boy that came out of a black neighborhood. I was the only white family on the block. You can ask my siblings. As far as the foreign policies, you need to bring them back into alignment. The economy, guys, we're in trouble because we spent $6 trillion here and someone's going to pay for it. This whole discussion about electricity, which I wish we had more time to talk about, is just befuddling, because just to give you a little food for thought, almost every single building on the island of Manhattan, the borough of Manhattan, New York County, is heated with oil. So if you're suggesting we're going to convert them to electricity because we don't want natural gas now or any gas coming through your stoves, etc., please tell me how you plan on doing that. Simply stated, folks, it can't be done. We're not positioned to make this transition. That's it in a nutshell. We can't run our air conditioners in the city of New York on hot summer nights because we're shutting down the power sources. California has rolling blackouts. Last year they asked you not to charge your electric cars. Guys, we're all in favor of going to something that might better the future of this country and subsequently our children. But stop insulting our intelligence. I leave you with that for the day. Thank you for joining us today, guys. My name is Lou Palumbo. This is Between the Lines, and I encourage you to contact me at betweenthelines.tv.